Hey everybody, welcome to the final episode of Loki episode 6 review here on the DBC pod. Phil, this is your second viewing of the day we just had? Is it
Correct.
number 2? I'm getting out of the shower or just waking up and Phil's already said, I've seen it already. I'm like, what? Like you were up way earlier than I was. I'm amazed at this episode. It did everything everybody wanted, and then almost nothing of what everybody wanted at the same time, I think.
Right. I was kind of like what I was telling you when you were like, "Did you write notes for this?" I was like, "I have pages of notes with questions for like what this means," versus actual like commentary. So
Yeah, I mean, much like this episode, we're going to try to talk through it linearly, but much like the sacred timeline, it all jumps all over the place. I think that's a good
time is a
synopsis of how it's
circle,
going to...
not
Not
a
anymore.
straight line.
First thing I noticed was the Marvel opening different, where they had the Marvel
It was
logos
very
come down?
different. Yeah, no,
Because
the
I noticed
intro
that.
to this was really cool. Had a lot of quotes from the past Marvel movies and was playing the song that played at the end of Endgame, or spoiler Endgame,
There's no
where,
spoilers.
where Steve Rogers stayed back in time and was dancing with Peggy. That was the song. They
Mm-hmm.
also mixed in some quotes from historical figures. Like I know there's something from Nelson Mandela in there and stuff like that. So,
Hmm.
but they were doing that while they were. I mean, the images to me was jumping from like one universe to another and then forming into what we think was the sacred timeline, circling around the the building, which I think was referred to as the Citadel
The
at the end of
Citadel, yes.
time.
So I thought
Yeah,
it was a cool opening. It kind of
yeah,
set the tone.
I
It
think
was
so. Yeah,
obviously like, okay, this is for real now. We have these historic moments, and it felt kind of powerful.
yeah,
So the center didn't look like the quantum realm to me, right? It
no,
just looked like somewhere in a nexus of space. I mean,
yeah,
generic background type of thing. At first, I meant, oh, was that the sacred timeline going around the castle? And apparently it was, or the Citadel, and yes, it was because it showed that later on.
hmm
A couple interesting comments here. I mean, it just jumped right into it, which was I was happy. There was no like
yeah.
dialogue. They're walking right
That
up
was
to
one
the
thing I have to
castle.
say. The episode, just kind of the flow of it, was not what I was expecting. I thought it was going to be building up to who we were going to meet, and it kind of like went right into it, which is
Right, the
nice. I
meeting
thought it
was
was
the
a good
whole
change.
episode, all
Yeah,
38 minutes or whatever the runtime
yeah,
was on it. It was good. So they get right to the castle, and we're ready to find out what's on the other side. Right, they have a little bit of dialogue on the outside, not particularly funny or anything else. It was just kind of characterish. They had two statues right on the outside. I thought that was going to be something. One of them had like a face of like a clock or something else like that. I noticed, but it turned out to be nothing. Maybe some smarter people
Mhm.
could tell me what that actually means, if it meant anything. And then Miss Minute shows up, and I
Yep.
thought that was rather interesting. They had a really
With almost like a
interesting
jump
dialogue.
scare when
Yeah,
she
right.
just
It's
like
like
popped up. It's like, oh,
hello. Yes. So now, once we started to go through the rest of the episode, I never really thought about Miss Minute's dialogue and what it all meant because it was kind of strange. It was basically she shows up. He says he is impressed. Who? He who remains. And they try to make a deal with Loki and Sylvie and offers Loki like you can be the king of Asgard or have the throne of Asgard. They have the Infinity Gauntlet. You can kill Thanos. You can take over New York. You can own everything. You can be amazing. And then Sylvie, you can lead a normal life with memories and blah 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 blah. And they could have two Lokis, and you can make it work together. And then they turn
yeah,
down the offer, and then continue. So this is one of the branch off moments. Is we know what happens, right?
yeah,
So, the he who remains. We'll get to that in a moment. Doesn't want them to go back into the timeline. He wants them to do something else. So, what was the motivation behind this? You think?
I'm not sure if it was just to make the viewer question things. I don't know if it's sort of putting some doubt in their minds about what they really wanted. Because if you looked at their faces, Loki seemed a little bit like kind of considering it or like, huh. Whereas she was like, no, we want free will. And he's like, yeah, no, no, we're here to do that. So I don't know if that was kind of just planting the seeds to then connect to the final offer that they get later on in the episode. But otherwise, it kind of seemed like if they already knew what was going to happen, what was the point of it? But
And then I forget the actual dialogue. Ravona was she talk to Miss Minutes or something, downloading something, and then she says, well, he wanted to give you this because it would help you learn something better instead. And he's like,
yeah,
he who? And then she just like ran away, like, ha ha ha, didn't mean to say that.
yeah,
And then
yeah, we
she was
know. So, yeah,
confused.
so in last episode, Renslayer asked her to get all the information on like the creation of time and the creation of the
Right.
TVA. So instead, she got something else from. She just kept, Miss Minutes just kept saying he. I'm assuming it's the same he who remains. Gave her this information, which we see ahead. She, I guess, uses that information to go through a portal at the end and kind of leave. So I don't know if this was like a backup plan of his or why she got this information, and what she did with it, where she went.
Well,
That
that's
was
one of my
big
last questions.
Yeah, that's one of my big questions.
So we'll get there
Yep.
towards the end. Okay, then Sylvie and Loki enter a room with a broken statue.
Yeah, notice there were, I guess, 4 statues. 3 were still standing and 1 was fallen. So I don't know if it was representing the 3 timekeepers that were still there, and the one was a fallen timekeeper or something. I don't know.
I don't know what
some symbolism to it.
Yeah, I was like, this is going to show up again because obviously they've got this big citadel. They're going to be chasing through it and going through traps, and like it's going to be like a Zelda level type of thing. Never came up again. But out of that note, I thought that kind of stood out to me. Then they enter the room. The door opens, and out pops out the He Who Remains, who is obviously the actor that's eventually going to play Kang in
Jonathan
Quantumania.
Majors.
So we're going to name him Kang.
Except it's easier to say, I think.
Yes, they never mention his name, right? Yep. And we know. Obviously, we know who it is because he's casted to be that character. He references later, I've been known by many names, a ruler, a conqueror, ha ha ha, and then so okay, yes, we know who it is. And what I kind of thought was it's kind of interesting. So he blinks around because he knew he was going to swing their swords, and he kind of have this whole dialogue where he explains why you can't kill him because he knows how everything is. He hands him transcripts of what they were going to say. He says he's just a man of flesh and blood. I like how he called them both Loki, and then later on called one Sylvie and one Loki, type of thing. I kind of picked that up. So that was the big reveal. So what were you feeling as soon as that happened? Because we've been predicting this or asking about or thinking about this for
we were predicting like what, and I think both of us were kind of thinking maybe it would be in a post-credit scene or like he'd get mentioned or something. But I mean, I was personally surprised that we're only like 10 minutes into the episode.
Not even. I think we could go in. It's probably 5 minutes.
Yeah, whatever. So I was surprised that it was him already. I was super excited about it because it's like, all right, they're not messing around. This isn't another Ralph Boner. This is really the character, and I was really excited to see him. And just one comment, I thought his acting was like amazing. I thought he was awesome in this. He was like, I mean, they say like, what is it? The actors who like chew on the scene or whatever. Like he was just like, he went all in on this character and how he played it and everything. It was great.
Well, I mean, I think this is the only time he gets to play Kang this way, but more on that later. So as soon as you get that reveal, he gets him into his office, I guess. It switches back to Mobius versus Renslayer. Mobius shows up in Renslayer's office. He knows her secret. Kind of they go back and forth, and B-15 is jumping back into 2018 Fremont, Ohio, and it's the real Ravonna Renslayer named Rebecca. She's a principal or teacher or something at a school.
Something out of school, yep. Which is where the pen came from.
Yep. So that I thought that was a pretty interesting tidbit. And then some of the other guards are like, oh, snap, right? And I guess kind of start piecing things together. What's interesting, I find that she's been there for a very long time, yet she was a variant from 2018. So that kind of shows the depth of the TVA, I guess.
Yeah. And just how another example of how time is not linear.
Exactly. So it gets you thinking like, oh, just stop thinking about it. It's just not going to make sense. A couple things. So we go back to the whole act or the dialogue between Kang and the Lokis. King explains why he knows everything already, and he paved the way for the Lokis to get there. So it's kind of like this little setup and kind of dialogue. Did you have any like pickups from this initial speech? And this is before Mobius attacks Renslayer.
Yeah, so just that the whole thing was orchestrated for them to get there. Like this was the end. This was his end plan, right? Was for them to get there. And then the only other thing was, again, planning a little dissension. I don't know if it was on purpose, but he mentions to Sylvie, can you trust anyone? And I think that played a role later. So that was the only other tidbit I had from there, other than obviously just explaining things.
So the interesting part comes after the next scene. But first, See, Moby attacks Renslayer. She puts him down. Renslayer goes off to quote unquote find free will, which I thought was interesting. I don't know what that means. I have questions at the end where we can kind of pontificate in the future.
And prior to that, he asks her, he says, we need to give people free will. And she's saying only one person has free will, the one in charge. Yeah. But then she goes off in search of free will. So I don't know. Like you said, we'll talk about that later, what that means.
Is she calling the leader, quote unquote, free will? That's who it is. So she's searching free will as a person rather than a
maybe
philosophy or whatever. What was interesting, though, you could see the panic in Renslayer. Like, her whole life is being dashed. She doesn't know who to believe, but she's sticking to the only thing she knows, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think she uses the term, like, maybe the TVA was a necessary lie. You know, like, this is kind of had to be set up the way it was. So, yeah, I get it that it's not what I thought it was, but maybe we still need to stick with it.
Here's my prediction. I'm going to throw one in right now at 10 minutes or 11 minutes into the show. This is the beginning of Renslayer falling in love or beginning a relationship with Kang variant, whatever we find out. Yeah. Like, she's going to go and search with them, and she's willing to believe in the lie, believe in whatever, right? That she could easily just fall for him and not understand, like, Sylvie's hatred for him of, like, taking away free will.
Right.
She's like completely bought into
if she thinks the person in charge has free will, if I can rule with him, then it gets me free will at least too.
Yeah. So she's kind of like hugging power, and you can kind of see. I think we've all been like, oh, that's Renslayer. That's Kang. It has to be Kang because that's her. That's their lovers and whatever from the comics.
Yeah, a whole lot of things in the comics, but yeah, there's a big interrelation between the two.
But I think what we're going to find out is we're going to see the start of that relationship, not that the relationship has been ongoing.
Right.
Which I don't think anybody expected, right? I don't think anybody said, like, this will happen rather than, oh, it has to happen. Maybe she just got mind wiped or whatever. So I think that's going to be interesting. So then the really interesting things, like, this whole show has been dialogue. This whole season has been really just good storytelling and not a lot of action. And the action scenes have been, I don't want to say the worst part of the show because worse is but the least.
Yeah, they kind of just break up the dialogue.
Yeah, I mean, like, it really never served any purpose other than to be like, okay, let's get back to the more interesting things. So he who remains, Kang, Mr. Kang, said, he's a human from the 31st century. Mm-hmm. I don't know if they're actually ever going to go into his lineage as it is in the comic books.
So there's a lot in the comic books about that, but that is the same in the comic books, that his character was Nathaniel Richards in the 31st century, who was actually a descendant of Reed Richards from the Fantastic Four. So who knows if they're going to play that connection or not.
Be a thing. Yep. We'll see who the cast for Reed Richards.
Yeah.
That might give us a hint. So 31st century, he discovered the multiverse. He invented the tech. He discovered that universes stack upon each other. They started talking to each other, exchanging stuff, and it's just peace, and everybody's loving and everything else, right? Mm-hmm. I basically, it seemed like he was only talking to himself, so it was only himself exchanging information. There wasn't like multiple people type of thing. And then all of a sudden, they started, as any with any human, greed starts, and some variants were not as wholesome as other variants, and that was the actual start of the multiversal war, which I thought was interesting because they forgot.
I think it was interesting that the whole like propaganda video at the beginning with Miss Minutes explaining the multiverse war, everyone's like, oh, well, that's not true then, right? If the whole TVA is a lie, but it did actually happen, maybe not the exact same way it was framed in the propaganda video, but it wasn't necessarily completely false.
Yeah, so it's just a bunch of gangs fighting each other. Apparently, we don't know how like extensive those wars were. Was it all kind of like in a, space somewhere fighting each other, or like worlds being blown up? Were there armies, or was it just kind of natural disaster-esque stuff? Maybe we'll find out as the multiverse unfolds. So he told how he finished the war and the start of the TVA, which I thought was kind of interesting, kind of predictable, but like essentially he discovered Alioth. He experiments on him, weaponizes it, uses that to destroy all the other variants, and creates a TVA, a bureaucracy, just like we all say, to easily manage the timeline and all the other stuff. And he didn't do that. We were all predicting he did that to rule. He did that to contain power, or any of this other stuff. The Kang, this variant of Kang that we first were introduced to, he seems altruistic, right? This is like we've all done bad things, but this is the best thing for everybody. It's peace and stability. That was his only goal. It wasn't power over anything. He didn't seem like he was lording over it. He's just like, this is what I'm maintaining, and that's
Yeah.
it.
I think
Um,
even though like when he was talking about when there was still peace between the different variants, he did say there's peace. It was kind of pompous and egotistical peace. So he definitely still has that like ego and he wants to be
mm-hmm.
right and wants to be in charge, but it's not to like be purposely, mean to people and have slaves and things like, it wasn't like that. It's just that he thinks he knows what's best and it's best for him to be in charge.
Right. So of course, as all you know, dictators are. So he's a
Yeah.
benevolent dictator at the very least.
Yeah.
And his acting was really interesting because he was more of like a jester than anything else, cracking
Yeah.
jokes, being relaxed. He wasn't like a commanding villain or whatever you
Yeah.
want to call him. He was kind of like tired and
Yeah.
like I've seen this before. Oh, this is interesting kind of stuff, which I thought was a
Yeah.
really interesting take on
Yeah. It's
I guess
definitely
this
a big
variant.
contrast when everyone's like, oh, Kang's going to be the next big bad, kind of comparing it to Thanos, who's obviously, completely different attitudes
Yes.
and stuff like that. Yeah.
But
But
he says, if you think I'm the devil, wait till you meet my variants.
yeah.
So he goes into this whole thing where he basically offers two solutions to them. Says either you go away and I take over, or I kind of do my own thing, or you two take over and I retire and go off somewhere. And he goes into I didn't really follow through the whole pitch of why it has to be them. He didn't really go deep into it. It was just
Yeah.
like
Well, he
just
said he
basically
did. He ran all the
yes.
simulations, and like you even mentioned, you saw one like blackboard with mathematical equations and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. And he was trying to figure out who is the person that could replace him because he says he's old and tired. He needs somebody to replace him. And at the end, what he found out is actually isn't one person; it's two people, and it's meant to be Loki and Sylvie. So that's why he orchestrated the whole thing to get them there.
Yep. He mentioned he lived a million lifetimes, which is a
Yeah.
lot, and we don't know how he stays alive this whole thing, but he's,
But he says he's a lot
super
older
powerful.
than he looks, and he's tired, and so yeah, so he leaves it with them saying, "Okay, you have the choice. You can either kill me and see what replaces me, kind of
Mm-hmm.
naturally in the timeline thing, or we agree that you take over and kind of keep the charade of the TVA going
So up
to
until this
maintain them."
point, yeah. So up until this point, like a lot of this is predictable, right? As soon as we
Hmm.
hit like it's Kang, like everything starts setting into place. The
Hmm.
offer of two Lokis taking over might have been kind of predictable only because there's like people predicted Loki might be the man behind the
Yeah.
curtain, so to speak. So that could have been a variant that he was looking at and kind of played with that, but it didn't, or at least not at this time anyway. And then it was kind of funny, like the music kind of stopped and turned a little ominous. It says we just
Yeah.
crossed a threshold,
Yeah.
and that's where he kind of like oh, I don't know what's
I
going to happen now. I've never
exactly.
recorded this
Yeah.
before. So the Lokis start fighting each other because basically Sylvie wants to kill him. Loki wants to not kill him and just like let's
Or at
chill
least
for
think
like two
about it.
minutes.
Like,
Let's like
yeah,
figure out a
exactly.
plan. Because Sylvie's always been like headstrong and just kind of dove into things violently all the times. So there's the whole Loki fight. Sylvie's filled with rage, and then Loki says, "I don't want a throne. I just want you to be okay." They kiss, and then she opens up a door and kicks Loki out, and now he's back
Yep.
in the TVA somewhere. Sylvie kills Kang. Kang winks and says, "See you soon." But it's not him that we're going to see soon. It's one of his
It's
variants, right?
yeah.
So what we found that was interesting was what I found was interesting was at the top of the show I said we got everything we wanted and not anything we wanted because so
Yeah.
they didn't reveal Kang, right? They just
Yeah.
revealed a guy that looks like a Kang, and he was just kind of like old Loki. He just kind of went away somewhere
Yeah.
and chilled out and let things kind of just do what they need to do to survive, so to speak. They won't name Kang until one dominant version of Kang kind of comes out of all of this in the future. We'll talk about that in just a minute.
Yeah.
So our Kang dies. We go look outside and literally see branches off the timeline. Like it's
Yeah.
a visual, like it's happening.
And we also notice, or at least I did, that after a little, like a minute, Sylvie kind of collapses and in grief, or I don't know the best way to describe it, but it's kind of like I don't know what she realized. Did she maybe realize, oh wait, what did I do? Maybe I should have listened to Loki, or is it just more, it's done. This is what I wanted done. I don't know. It was, but she
Uh,
definitely. It wasn't like a celebratory thing.
Yeah,
It's
I
kind
mean,
of
like
like
I think I only took it as like typically when a person gets their revenge after doing it for I don't know thousands of years because
yeah,
there was a throwaway line that says I got pruned way before you ever existed type of
right,
thing. So that's thousands of years she's been
yeah, yeah,
planning this, I guess, right? Because this Loki's only like what 8,000 years old, 9,000 years. I don't know. Thor said his age at one point in one of the
one point,
movies,
yeah,
whatever it might be. So I took the whole scene as like I'm done. Oh, it doesn't feel good. I'm still kind of
right,
like I feel like crap still. So I
yeah,
kind of took it as that where we'll find out more. Who
yep,
knows when? Um, and then Loki is back at the TVA. He runs to find Mobius. He says, "I don't know what we did. We did something really bad. And, planned it. Blah blah blah." He gets all panicky, and Mobius is like, "Hey, hey, relax. What unit are you from? I don't know you. What unit are you from?" You're like, "Uh oh, things
yeah.
aren't the same. We're not in Kansas anymore."
Yeah, and I
Um,
don't know when that shift happened because right before that, you do see Mobius and B-15 talking in that main lobby area, saying like, "There's no turning back now," and B-15 says, "Who said anything about turning back?" So they seem to kind of at that point know what was going on, and I don't know if there was the camera work when Loki was running past the bookshelves, if that was supposed
mhm.
to signify like here's where the shift happens, and
Well, I
now he's
mean,
in
it
like
might
the
not
new world.
necessarily.
But
I mean, the timeline might be divergent,
yeah,
and now they're just doing their normal job, right?
yeah,
It could be the same thing. We just led to believe that, you know, with all the stuff going on, that this is just what their normal day at work type of
yep,
thing. But we don't know yet. So, anyway, everything's changed because there's no more timekeepers. There's a timekeeper,
hmm,
and it's actually the face of Kang, the Conqueror or whoever version of
yeah,
Kang from the comic books. I've read that there's a whole bunch of different ones,
yeah, yeah,
and it's only him. So his ego has been taken over. Like the dead Kang V1 was kind of like I don't need to be in the spotlight. I'm just kind of doing this behind the scenes. This Kang's like this is my stuff now,
yeah,
and and that was the end of the episode, right? And
hmm,
of course, we got the thing. Oh, Loki will come back in season 2, so there's going to be a
yeah.
season 2 about this, which is pretty cool. Is this the first Disney Plus thing that we've got a confirmed season 2 on? Right?
It is, yeah. I think from what I understand, I don't know if anything's officially been said, but the thought was WandaVision's was definitely only going to be one season. And then it seemed like Falcon and the Winter Soldier was they're not sure it was going to see how it played out or not. So this is definitely the first thing that's been confirmed
Confirmed.
for a season. And my understanding it's at least in pre-production already and stuff like that, if not already having some things filmed.
Yeah.
So
So here we go. So first question I have for you, Phil, is what did Miss Minutes give Renslayer that allowed her to do? Like he said, he will give you something that lets you do your job better, or something like that. I forget the exact line. What do you think she got as a
so
file?
I think it was something that explained what was going on and what she needed to do to get outside of the timeline of what was going to happen. For lack of a better word, this she was his backup plan. That if the Lokis didn't take his offer because he didn't know, right? It ran out at some point that he would need some protection or something like that. So I think it was a way for her to get out of this before
His
the
third
reset happened
option.
or whatever. Yeah, like option C type thing that he didn't mention to the Lokis.
That's pretty good speculation because I couldn't come up with an answer in the 20 minutes since she said that. But like I'm thinking like that's basically going to allow her to search for him
Hmm,
somewhere in the timeline because he's dead at the end of the timeline, but he's still
yeah,
alive somewhere in the timeline, right? Um, and maybe that's kind of a way to reset everything. Who knows?
yeah,
Because he did talk about, did have a line about reincarnation too
yeah.
in that, and I don't know if that's just his another variant is his reincarnation or this
I
variant
took it to
gets
mean that just
reincarnated.
that like you come back as different things or whatever, not necessarily like that specific life would come back, but who
But he
knows?
did say, I wrote this down. I always end up back here.
Yeah,
So I don't know if that's him actually coming back there or the whole multiverse of madness, right? So that's the next
yeah,
level playing field. We just got introduced to the new ball game, and is the ultimate goal because I could see it coming out like if Kang's storyline goes beyond multiple phases, right? So
hmm,
we Doctor Strange and Spider Man are hinted to have all this stuff in it.
yep,
So my question to you before we go into anything else about season 2 of Loki and Loki's personal thing. This is like your realm of all the questions that you have, right? So I'm gonna ask you a question. How long does the multiverse war last in the MCU phases? Let's say.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and that's one thing I'm wondering was like how present is it? Because like yeah, we know our understanding is it's going to have an impact in Spider-Man and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and we know Kang's in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, but like, does this impact the Eternals? Does this impact the
That's my
Hawkeye show
question.
and stuff like that? Like, so I don't know if it's going to be like this is just one part of what's going on, and then there's other things, or but there's also so much more going on. Like there's the shows and the movies and stuff. It's not like even in the past when like see phase 4 seems like it's going to have as much content as like the first 3 season phases put together.
Yeah,
So
it's gonna be here's kind of like I don't know understand or I don't get yet the pace of this storyline. Is this gonna
yeah,
be like Hawkeye takes place after Endgame? Obviously, it's I'm assuming current day on Earth. So are we gonna get like multiple levels of storylines? Like here's the how Netflix was like the street level
yeah,
Marvel characters like back like 6 years ago or whenever like Daredevil and Punisher were all doing their
yep,
thing. Is this going to be like we're going to have like a Hawkeye like just Marvel stories and that type of thing, or is that going to be separate from like all the multiverse stuff? Like you could have the Spider-Man thing with all that stuff leaking in, and then like that could be like 10 minutes part of the movie,
yeah,
and you're like, what was that? And it goes on, but it's tidbits. Doctor Strange obviously is going to be like all about this, but how does like did we end with Fantastic Four, which is what 2025, 26, somewhere
somewhere around there.
in that area, like 5 years from now, essentially? Are we going to get 5 years in multiverse storylines? Because like you said, Eternals. Like I find it hard to believe that you just release this character in the multiverse upon pop culture and then ignore it,
Right.
right? Because Loki's been uber popular throughout the internet, right, and everywhere. They're talking about it. Can you go from that to be like, okay, Eternals, we're just some gods living on Earth for hundreds of or tens of thousands of years, whatever it is, and we fought some bad guys. We have an Avengers reference, and then that's it.
Yeah. Or is it that everything's connected, right? And like this event almost like reset the playing field. Everything's different, because even with the Eternals, the big question is like, well, why weren't they helping in the Battle of New York and helping with Thanos? It's like, well, did this event trigger like
Them waking up.
waking them up or something like that? Or so I don't know. Or is
Mm,
so I feel like it's gonna at a minimum subtly impact everything, but
I hope
I don't
so.
know. But at the same time, like not every movie in the first 3 phases featured Thanos, right? It ultimately built to that.
Well,
But yet some things
it
it
was
did,
all a story like you're building the
yeah,
Avengers. You need the
yeah,
Avengers to fight Thanos. So how do we get to the Avengers?
right.
Here
And
are
yet we know side story they're building up the Thunderbolts, right? Like so obviously that's going to happen on the sideline, but are ultimately they going to be involved in fixing the timeline? Like I don't know. Is that like kind of be the building storyline?
it has to go together somehow because you can't
Yeah,
just have these storylines that just like Black Widow was Black Widow versus kind of a minor villain, right? The
yeah,
villain, it was like it basically encapsulated the single. There's a bad guy. You went, you fought the bad guy. The bad guy's
right.
neutralized. End of story. Right? There was
Yeah,
it was a contained storyline, kind of a window into the Marvel universe, and
yeah,
everybody was happy with it. But we moved on, like we talked about last week in the
right.
weekly show. It was
And now
just
you have Yelena coming out of it though, right? And she's going to be part of the future, but like yeah, the story was basically
where does it all come
self-contained.
together? Like, how does
Yeah,
the multiverse affect Earth? Because
yeah,
obviously Kang is from Earth, but from
yeah.
1,000 years from now, type of thing. So that's going to be interesting how they weave those stories together. How do they keep the fans' attention from like we just introduced this massive thing? Like there's now
Hmm.
versions of everything all over the
Yeah,
place. But please concentrate to this tiny little story right here after we just gave you a taste of this amazing thing. So
yeah.
that's why I'm really curious about Eternals. Like, can you create another storyline with other villains? Because they're going to talk about Celestials and Deviants
Yeah.
and all these people. Is the multiverse just a method to wake up the other big people, and then that's the storyline? Now, where like all these other massively
Hmm.
powerful agents kind of come in and introduce the X-Men and Silver Surfer, and that's how they all get together, and you kind of now increase the plane of power. Is that how they're going to weave? I don't know. I'm very interested.
Yeah, like are all those Celestials beyond like the timeline, right? So they didn't really care that there was multiverses and the timeline thing was going on. We're above that, right? So are they now going to be like, all right, well, what are you doing over here, Kang? Like,
I mean, we can't forget about Wanda being a Nexus being, right? So there's no variants of her. She's the only one. And,
I mean, I think that's definitely going to be key, and I don't know if that's the key element of Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness is getting Wanda, knowing that she's a Nexus being. Actually made me think the post-credit scene in the last episode of WandaVision when she's going through the Darkhold and all that stuff, and at the end she kind of looks up, and I'm wondering if that looking up is like when this the multiverse started happening, like that kind of was, she was like, uh-oh, like, something like that. But
that is an excellent point. I hope you're the only person on the internet that thought about that. We need to take credit for it on social media. Okay, so we can't really talk about the future of Marvel because there's smarter comic book nerds than us that can probably guess a couple things. We're not that type of show. We're just two dudes that love these shows. So what does Loki do now? What are you predicting where does he go? Where does his character arc take him? What is his, is he going to be like, I got to go get Sylvie back, or is like, I got to go fix everything now? Like, where does he go?
I think I don't know. I mean, I think they really left it hanging. Like it's in this
tough question.
Like he's in this new universe. He's got to figure out, like, is he going to have to wake up Mobius again? Or, I mean, I think giving him, because Sylvie got trapped at the end too, right? Or at least we left her there.
Right. She's just sitting in the middle of everything. I mean, she might not even be affected by the timeline at this point, right?
Yeah, who knows? So, I mean, the only thing he might be able to think to do is to try to go after her again. So I think that could be a plot line.
Maybe.
But I don't know.
Is that an interesting one, though?
It's got to be big. I mean, that could be like the first episode. That can't be the whole season, though. Like, I don't know. So I don't know. I mean, assume it's him trying to fix things, right? And adapting to what happened. But I don't know.
Do we know?
I'm really curious. And that's my big question is, when does season 2 take place? Because we know
it's got to be like a year from now, right? Another summer event.
Yeah. I mean, I was trying to think of the movies that we know impact part of the multiverse or whatever. So we know Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness is March of 2022.
Yep.
And then we know Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania is February of 2023. So does Loki season 2 happen between those two?
I thought Ant-Man was sooner.
Yes, or does season 2 not happen until after Ant-Man?
So we've got at least 3 movies between now and Ant-Man, right? So we've got Eternals, we've got
I mean, if you want me to go through everything. Yep. So we have Shang-Chi in September.
Right. Yep.
Eternals in November. Spider-Man No Way Home in December. Doctor Strange in March. Thor Love and Thunder in May. Black Panther Wakanda Forever in July. The Marvels in November 22. Then Ant-Man in Feb of 23. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 in May.
My head is spinning.
I know. It's like so many things. So it's like, to your point, though, is this everything going to be involving this, or some of them self-contained, or I don't know.
I mean, we don't even know where they're going, right? They haven't even put a movie out that's post Endgame yet. We've just gotten these like shows, so we don't know how they're setting that up.
Yeah.
So the Eternals is going to show us a lot of things. Shang-Chi is going to be interesting because it shows a lot of different little tidbits, but it looks like a self-contained story that's introducing a character, right?
Right. It's introducing him and a couple others that might, Abomination was shown in that, and he supposedly joins the Thunderbolts, and so it seems like more.
Yeah.
That's more of that building up that storyline, but how does that all connect?
So we're getting like a fake Avengers kind of team building up, right? The Thunderbolts,
and then in the shows they're also introducing the new Avengers, where you have like, the Wanda and Vision's kids and Hawkeye's daughter,
or the young Avengers.
Yeah, the young Avengers.
So I mean, if they build up enough content, then you can have things that ignore the multiverse storyline, because you can have these different power level fights, and like if you have Thunderbolts running around kind of as like a Black Ops kind of sketchy superhero team, then you can maybe get the old Avengers coming back to kind of, or whoever the new adult Avengers are, right? I don't think they're going to put the young Avengers fighting up with these people. Maybe that's a storyline that's being told with everything else kind of going in the background.
Yeah.
But yeah, Shang-Chi is basically, I think, kind of like an Iron Man or Thor 1 type of movie. Introduces a character, self-contained show, gives them the background, and kind of introduce kind of some plot lines that
Yeah.
continue the rolling on down the line type of thing. Doctor Strange, I think, is going to be a key movie all next year. Like the Wakanda stuff is going to be another introductory storyline. Spider-Man is going to be really awesome. Are they that's one that I think a lot of people are going to talk about is, the new Spider-Man. Is he going to be the next Iron Man type of thing?
Right.
With just because of his tech, but he's still too much of a kid, right? He's probably in college at this point, then I would imagine, if they skip a couple years type of thing, but he's still not, 30 something years old type of person. Are we going to see Robert Downey Jr. again because of the multiverse?
I mean, I think everything's on the table now. Even all the people that said, like, oh, I'm never playing Steve Rogers again, or I'm done with Tony Stark or whatever. But I don't know if they'll ever do like full movies, but I'd be shocked if they don't do a cameo or something at some point.
These guys, I mean, there's some actors that can just bury these characters and move on, like Harrison Ford almost did with Han Solo. But they always come back because it's a big chunk of their life. It was like the last 15-ish years that they were this character. And
especially if you can come back just for like 6 months, like
they deserve time
like
off.
$5 million or whatever, and like just have fun with it. Like, why not?
I'm all about them going on, finding other roles, doing different movies, being somebody else. I mean, I get that break, but like once that's all done and you kind of stretch your legs a little bit, you're like, let's get back to that.
These movies are still
Marvel
pretty
universe.
good.
Yeah, I had fun, and they pay well. Okay, so season two, because we started talking about this and we got on a tangent because we love tangents on these shows. So season 2, Loki comes out, let's say next year, just like the Mandalorian is like, it took a year off, but it's because the Book of Boba Fett's coming in its place in December. So let's say Loki comes out sometime after, you said Doctor Strange was what, March or May last year? First half of the year.
Yeah, Doctor Strange is March 25th, 2022.
Okay, so let's say Loki comes out after Doctor Strange.
Mm-hmm. It's like basically next year.
Because I think Sylvie is now a character, right? I think she now can survive on her own. You can give her own movie, her own side plot in any movie coming up or any show coming up. We've got our Loki that might be in any of those movies. You don't know if he doesn't pop up, right? And that might, any kind of cameo or side kind of scenes in any of the movies might be the premise that leads into season 2.
Yeah.
So my guess, and you can tell me if you agree or you have a better idea, is you get these movies, things are happening, and Loki shows up in one of them, most likely Doctor Strange, to either explain things or whatever. Because they might be able to completely ignore the multiverse as everything gets sets up, because this is happening up somewhere else and it hasn't hit Earth yet in our timeline.
Yeah, is it that, or has it changed and that like now they're in the new sacred timeline and they don't really realize things have changed, or
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how it's going to impact things, because that's why I don't think they can ignore it, because even the TVA has changed now. So what does that mean for everything else? So we can go in circles like trying to guess what that is. But I think Loki's going to show up probably in one of those movies.
Mm-hmm.
The 2 or 3 movies. That's kind of, he's going to say something or do something or whatever, and most likely Doctor Strange. And then they're going to use his show as a bridge to setting up the next arcs of whatever other stuff that's coming out.
Mm-hmm.
Because there hasn't been an announcement of like the new group, right? Like there was a bunch of different individual movies, but that all led to Avengers. Like you had Captain America Civil War, which is a huge movie that had everybody in it. It featured Cap, but it was everybody, right?
Yeah.
It could have been an Avengers movie essentially. But there was no like yet anyway tie-in movie that's like, okay, the Avengers Endgame, like that was like the backbone of everything, right? So we haven't had that yet. Do you think any of the movies coming up are going to be the vehicles to do like the main storyline type of thing, or do you think they're just all going to mesh together somehow?
I think at some point they're going to mesh together, but I think there are going to be ones that identifies that core. I think Doctor Strange is going to be the first one. Although I think the Eternals is a total curveball, like what that could be.
We're
But
gonna have a
I
whole
think
discussion on that movie,
know.
I think.
But I think Doctor Strange, like that's the one everyone's kind of looking forward to. I mean, probably just because it has the word multiverse in it.
That's the
But I think
only thing we got right now. Yeah.
that's almost like I think the one that's really going to set like where are we going for here. But yeah, no, it's a good. Are they going to have an Avengers 4 or 5 or whatever that just features new people, but are still like a group name versus an individual name?
Pull up those movies again. What comes out the second half of next year?
So starting in Thor is May, Black Panther's July, the Marvels is November, and then Ant-Man and the Wasp is the February 23.
So Ant-Man and the Wasp definitely, because we know Kang is going to be in that. That might be that's definite kickoff point. Though I can't see them using Ant-Man as like the main vehicle because he's not like a Captain America, right?
Right. He's kind of the funny sidekick more.
By the way, Attractionality this weekend with MCU. We're doing the votes on it. It's going to be awesome. Yeah. In Captain America was high on my list, but we'll talk about that at another time. So we're gonna if Loki is next summer of next year, you're bridging straight into the Marvels. And Marvels is basically Captain Marvel and what's her name from WandaVision, where she got her powers.
Yeah, Photon.
Yes, Photon I was looking for.
And then Ms. Marvel's in it too.
Yeah, so those are going to be, that's a space show, right? Because they have these superpowers, right? So somebody with Ms. Marvel's or Captain Marvel's power level, you need something to have her to fight that kind of matches her. It's like basically like Superman versus like some dude on the street. You don't have that fight, right? Like you need a Superman level villain, Doomsday, to fight him, right? So there has to be something that they're fighting, right? Yeah. Something's going on, and that could be, the timeline type of stuff.
That could be that, or it could be what the Eternals are, right? It could be with the Titans and stuff like that.
Right, but I'm just saying Loki has to bridge, I would imagine, sets up that because that's how Kevin Feige works, right? Everything sets up the next thing, at least just a little bit, or introduces somebody, gives somebody a background in something like Falcon and Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
At this point, I think we're just speculating, and I don't think we're legally allowed to speculate longer than 45 minutes without beer in our hands. So we'll leave it at this. Phil, any closing thoughts on the show or anything else that I did not bring up that you wanted to talk about?
There were a couple of cool, neat little things. I noticed I'm trying to get to where my notes were. But like even the building, it was black, but it had those golden ribbons through it.
That looked like his timepiece thing that he had on his hand.
Exactly, yeah. But it reminded me, and other people have said this too, but I hope I pronounce this right, but it's the Japanese art of kintsugi, which is you broken pottery, you fix it with gold because you're trying to highlight the imperfections. So I don't know if there's something, I'm assuming that was done on purpose, right? So that the idea of that he was embracing the imperfections and trying to mend it in a glorious way.
Look at you getting all artsy on me. That's why you're valued on this show.
And the only other one, it really struck me at the beginning when we first met Kang that he was eating an apple. It seems so like kind of ordinary, but it reminded me of Doctor Strange when he first got the Time Stone, where he made the apple go forward and back in time from being eaten to being whole again. And then also somebody else brought up the whole idea like, okay, it's Kang with an apple, and then there's like man and woman, how it's almost like the apple represents wisdom and the snake tempting Eve with the apple. So was that a lie that he was tempting her with? But he was, I don't know. Maybe it's reading too much.
20 more minutes on this show. I don't know. That's interesting, but I don't have enough to really jump in on that. So I think it's interesting to bring up though.
Yeah, but other than that, I think I really enjoyed the show. I think it did the main thing the show did was just to set up like phase 4, right? Like it just kind of changed the playing board almost.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So I think, I don't know if we want to discuss which of the shows we like the best, but I think this had the most sort of meaning in kind of just setting forward, moving things forward. Right?
The only reason somebody considered like WandaVision better was just because it was such a unique way to tell a story. Because with the decades of the TV and all this stuff, that was really fun and kept people guessing. I think Loki by far had the biggest impact.
Yeah.
To me, had better sets, better music, better costume design. I'll go with that because I love the whole aesthetic of the show. And it had the most satisfying like payoff, right?
Yeah.
It was Agatha all along. It was cute. It was great. But all it did was just bridge the gap between old Wanda and the Scarlet Witch, right? So
Yeah.
it set her up. And then everything that happened was almost useless other than introducing Agatha, which I'm sure will pop up again somewhere.
She's coming back again.
But nothing as impactful as Loki. I thought was just amazing. It had I can't say it had better actors in it, but I mean we had Owen Wilson, we had Hiddleston, and we had all the actors.
The Majors and everybody's amazing.
It was crazy. So I have to say Loki's my favorite. Yours? You're sticking with WandaVision, aren't you?
I think I'm sticking with WandaVision as a standalone show, but I fully agree with what you're saying that Loki was more impactful and more meaningful, and it definitely had a more satisfying conclusion. It wasn't a Ralph Boner. So.
Well, now they're going to keep you guessing because you got one.
I know.
Where you didn't get what you wanted, and my camera doesn't show me, but I'm holding one thing on my hand over here, and then you've got this episode where you got your Kang, but you didn't get the Kang you wanted, which I thought was excellent the way they did that. It's like, it's Kang. Oh, and then he died. Oh, but it's not the real Kang that we're going to be fighting for.
Yeah, but it's just a Kang. It's not the main Kang. Or exactly. So.
And I think they pulled it off brilliantly with his acting and his nonchalance and all this other stuff. Okay, so we're going to cancel. We're going to stop right now. We appreciate you guys listening. Make sure you subscribe and like. And Phil, I think in the next couple of weeks, we have to figure out an extra show during the week where it's like 20 minutes of us yelling at each other or something. We'll pick something to fight about during the week just so we can have a bonus episode, or we'll think of something to do.
Okay.
I don't think we should do a top 5 list of something. I think there's enough people like the top 5 thing, and then we run out of ideas after 3 shows, and we're like, ugh. Then the show goes off the rails.
So we'll see. Nothing. I mean, we could even do, I think, like Jungle Cruise comes out soon, right? We could do a review of that. We'll figure it out.
Stuff like Yes, we will. That being said, guys, have a great day, great night. And if you're listening to this on the podcast, make sure you give us a 5-star rating on iTunes if you don't mind. And if you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you subscribe and like and help us out on that form. Or if you are doing that, do the reverse and help us out both ways. Why not? It takes 2 seconds to subscribe and like on YouTube. Everybody's got a YouTube account. I don't care who you are. You definitely do. That's it.
You probably have multiple. Like us on all of them.
That's
Find
it.
Your kids. Like us on your kids' account. Everything.
Force them. Offer them a cookie if they make fake accounts. Keep liking the video. Don't do that. No, that's not right. No, that's unethical. Anyway, guys, have a good one, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
Take care, everyone.